guys, it's me, Sarah Carey, editorial director of food at Martha Stewart, and I'm here with a great cake recipe. It's a snacking cake. It's a lemon snacking cake with a cream cheese raspberry frosting. Really delicious and quite simple as far as cakes go. To start off with, you want to butter and flour your pan. This is a 9-inch pan. We use professional style pans, so they're 9 by 2 inches deep, which is pretty important in some cases. I don't know how important it is for this particular cake. In some cases, the cake will overflow if you use a shallower cake pan. So we like these, especially because they have these nice straight sides, good weight, pale color, so they're not the non-stick, they're darker. We find that those can burn your cakes a little bit if you use them because they're so dark. I am realizing as I'm doing this that I'm supposed to line this with parchment, and I don't have any, so I'm going to risk it and hope that it comes out of the pan. I need to flour this. That helps, so you brush it with butter. We like to use softened butter when we do this instead of melted butter, because melted butter separates, and there are spots in the separated butter that don't actually have any fat in them, which is where the milk solids are, and your cake could stick there. So you get a better, more even coverage with the softened butter, and you can actually see spots where it's not covered. Like, you're probably not going to be able to see this because you're kind of far away, but I see right here there's a tiny, tiny spot that's not covered because it didn't get any flour on it. It's supposed to butter, line with parchment, and then butter again, and then flour. So we'll see how this goes. Could be a disaster. So you dust really nice to make sure it gets all over, and then I top out the excess. I usually do that into a garbage can, which seems a little wasteful, but I try not to waste too much. So here I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. To that, add 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of kosher salt. We use Diamond Crystal. If you're using Morton's, use 3/4 of a teaspoon. And if you're using fine sea salt, make sure to use half a teaspoon. You don't want to have too much. So whisk really well. Make sure your flour and your leaveners and your salt are all well combined. Lately I've taken to adding all my leavener and my salt to my butter, but I forgot to do it for this one because I'm following the recipe, which doesn't say to do that. But it's a great way to ensure that your leavener is fully distributed into your mixture. You don't have to worry about this, because if you're beating it with your butter and sugar in your mixture, you will, without a doubt, make sure that it is fully combined. So I have a cup of sugar, 2 eggs room temperature, and this is 2/3 of a cup of milk. In your mixer, I have 1.5 sticks of butter in here, and I'm adding my sugar to that. And then you beat that until it is light and fluffy. That usually takes about 2 minutes. While you're doing that, you can get your lemon ready. You need a tablespoon of lemon zest and 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice. You can do that while you are I don't usually remember to zest it with the channel side up, which is Martha's trick to catch all of the zest in the top. I almost always do it the other way around, but whatever. Remember this time, so that's all that matters. Make sure that you scrub your lemons, and if you can, use organic lemons, because you're eating the zest here, and you don't want to really be eating pesticides, or I don't anyway. These feel like maybe they're pretty juicy, so you may not need more than 2. You want to scrape your bowl down as it's beating, and make sure that it comes out nice and light and fluffy before you move on to the next step. I'm just going to squeeze my lemon juice. I need 1/3 of a cup. I'm just doing it directly into this ball jar, which has measurements on it because I left all my measuring things somewhere else. I could measure this in a dry measure, and I probably will do that after I squeeze this. But the difference is that with dry measures, if you fill it all over the top, which is the accurate measure, it's really hard to transport because there's nothing above the measure. So that's why the liquid measures are designed the way that they are, with a little, like about ½ an inch above the top measure. Makes it easier to transport. And they're clear so that you can see at eye level to make sure that your measurements are accurate. Creaming method. Cream your butter with your sugar. That traps the air into little air pockets that expand in the oven. It's also helped by the addition of leavener, which I have in this cake. The next thing that you will do in any standard creaming method is add your eggs. That also adds to leavening. Actually add your lemon zest, a tablespoon. Beat that in there. Then beat in your eggs one at a time. You do that so that they incorporate as much air as possible and hold that air and don't sort of slide around in the bowl. You can combine your lemon juice and your milk. That is going to make something that's like a buttermilk. Don't worry about it if it looks curdled, it's totally fine. Then add the last egg. This also gets 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I'm going to add that directly to the mixer bowl. Things seem to be sliding around a little bit, so I'm going to scrape down the bowl one more time. Scrape down the bowl anytime you feel like it's not mixing properly or things are getting stuck into the bottom of the bowl. Stop and scrape it down. You want to make sure at every step that things are well combined to make the cake with the best texture. Now what you do is you add your dry ingredients alternating with your wet ingredients. The mixture in the bowl looks a little bit broken. Don't worry about that if that happens. Once you start adding your dry ingredients, it will stop looking like that. It also could have something to do with the fact that if your eggs and your butter are at slightly different temperatures, that can happen too. Everything is supposed to be room temperature. Butter should never be too hot, and it's like 90 degrees in here today. So, could have something to do with that. Then add your liquid. You're alternating. So you do 1/3 of the dry ingredients, followed by about half of the wet, 1/3 of the dry, half of the wet, and then the final dry. Wet, and then the last of the dry. I do like to turn the machine off just so I don't run the risk of getting flour all over myself, etc. Beat to combine. I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. Okay, batter's done. Now, once you've got everything nice and mixed, remove it from the mixer, and I like to do one last stir to make sure that the butter on the bottom of the bowl is fully incorporated into the batter, and because if it's not, what happens is that you end up with butter streaks, especially in the top of your cake, which is the bottom of the bowl. So take it off the mixer, or if you're doing it by hand even, and then just give it a couple of stirs. There might be flour stuck to the side of the bowl, there might be butter stuck on the bottom. And then scrape your batter into your prepare pan. Remember that this is supposed to be lined with parchment and mine's not. Spread it evenly. If you have a small offset spatula, you can do it with that. I'm just using my rubber spatula. And then get this into the oven and bake it until the top springs back when it's lightly touched. That should take about 40 minutes. When the cake comes out of the oven, you're going to want to let it cool for a few minutes. Mine has been cooling for a few. And then, because I didn't use parchment paper, I'm running a paring knife around the edges. I don't usually do this when I'm very certain it's going to come out, but I'm just trying to be extra safe. Like, I can feel right here on this side that I didn't butter and flour well enough, so it was sticking a tiny bit. But I think we're going to be okay. And by we, I mean me. So then just flip it out onto the rack. Hopefully it will come out. Ta-da! All right, stuck a tiny bit, but I think that's more to do with the fact that I only let it sit for like 6 minutes or something. Should let it sit a little bit longer, but that's okay. Let it cool completely before you frost it, so I'm just gonna set this aside. It'll take probably about an hour. So for your frosting, it's a cream cheese frosting. In the bowl of my mixer, I have 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's room temp or softened. It doesn't have to be too soft. So depending on the temperature of your room, you might not want it room temperature. Like if it's 90, you probably don't. 6 ounces of cream cheese and a cup plus 2 tablespoons of confectioner's sugar. You may need a little bit less or a little bit more, so I'm gonna start with 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon. And then this is, I'll show you actually. Well, these are strawberries, but you can use strawberries or raspberries for this, and these are freeze-dried strawberries or raspberries. They look like that. And what you do is you just grind them up in the food processor or a mini chopper or something like that until they're really, really fine. And that's what you're going to flavor your frosting with. I like to use freeze-dried berries in this because if you use jam or fresh berries, it tends to make the frosting break because of the moisture and the butter. But the freeze-dried raspberries have an amazing flavor, really, really intense, and they have no ill effect on the texture of the frosting. So it's actually kind of great. I think I was supposed to beat the butter and the cream cheese together first and then add the confectioner's sugar, and I didn't. Because I was just so caught up in the moment. This is gonna be alright. Just beat it until it's creamy and pretty good. I'm gonna add the last tablespoon of confectioner's sugar. There's a thunderstorm outside. It got really, really dark. So it looks a little different. That's why. My cake is nice and cool. That's what happens when you have to wait for your cake to cool. And I have some fresh berries here that I'm gonna put on the top of my cake. And then you can add your ground freeze-dried berries. This was 1/3 of a cup or 1/4 of an ounce before I ground it, and obviously it's much less now. I'd say you'd be surprised at the intensity of the color and the flavor, but I think you shouldn't be because the flavor of those berries when they're freeze-dried like that are so intense. I'm kind of obsessed with freeze-dried berries. I use them all the time now because once I discovered what great flavor they add to things without adding moisture, it was kind of a life-changing event. I know that sounds dramatic, but it really did make a huge difference. I'm obsessed. And this is a snacking cake, so it's a single layer cake. I love the term snacking cake. That just implies that like you should just be able to eat this as, you know, a snack and it's not a dessert. Takes all the guilt right out of it, doesn't it? It's a very generous amount of frosting, but remember it's a pretty thick layer of cake because we haven't split it, so don't be shy with the frosting. And then a nice pile of fresh berries on the top. Completely not necessary, but certainly lovely. Okay, plate. So there you go, that's your lemon snacking cake. I will give it a cut and a taste. Make sure that you fully cool your cake before you frost it, otherwise the frosting will melt. But I don't know if you can see this. This has a beautiful tender crumb. The acidity of the lemon juice has been offset by the baking soda, so there won't be any toughness in here. It's a really tender, lovely, super easy cake to make. And you can just have cake hanging around whenever you want. Oh my gosh. Tangy and delicious, fruity, amazing. It's lemon snacking cake with a raspberry cream cheese frosting. Enjoy. If you like recipes like this and you want more, make sure to click like and subscribe because we have plenty more where this came from.